The story begins by showing a couple of demonic figures known as absolutes. These absolutes were responsible for creating the different universes in their realms and then created countless creations within these universes. But soon, these beings got bored and wanted to create something for their amusement. So, they started to create wars between their own creations, and they observed these wars with excitement as the creations fought each other to the death. The absolutes really enjoyed this, so they continued it for a long time. Their creations were unaware that the wars they were fighting were nothing but mere entertainment for the absolutes. But an incident occurred in a universe where an absolute observing a war was murdered by one of his own creations. This was the same universe where Jin-Woo lived. While the other absolutes were just observing this war without interfering, their only concern was a world without a master and a power-up for grabs. They wondered who would be the one to obtain this power. The absolutes were enjoying all this suspense. The story shifts to the present, where a boy named Sung Jin-Woo, a college student, tells his friends about being selected to study at an art university. As he was leaving to start his studies there, his friends, showing disbelief, said that it was not possible. How could someone like Sung Jin-Woo, who was so unrefined, be selected to study at an art university? Sung Jin-Woo starts laughing and says that finally, he is free from this hell. In the background, they hear someone's voice congratulating Sung Jin-Woo for getting selected to study at an art college. Mockingly, the person says he didn't know that Sung Jin-Woo had any talents and was shocked to hear that he was selected for an art college. It was Lee Yoon-chul, the class bully. Sung Jin-Woo purposely mispronounces his name to irritate him and calls him Sungchul. In response, Lee Yoon-chul gets angry and, staring at Sung Jin-Woo, says his name is Lee Yoon-chul. He tells Sung Jin-Woo that thanks to him, his plan to take over the high school was ruined. In the background, a couple of students say that Yoon-chul is doing it again and acting so childish on graduation day. Another student says that he is always bullying the person who has lost both parents and is still trying to be positive. The scene shifts to Sung Jin-Woo, where Lee gets ready to punch him. Sung Jin-Woo easily dodges the strike and launches a kick to Lee's face, telling him that why don't they live a quiet life until they graduate. But we see that Lee was unharmed by that strike. Sung Jin-Woo is shocked, thinking how Lee was still standing after that hit. Lee tells him he didn't feel anything. We see Lee's hands start to emanate light as he charges his punch. He strikes Sung Jin-Woo, who barely dodges the hit. Everyone is shocked to see the scene as the locker where the punch landed is destroyed. Lee is also shocked and doesn't understand what is going on. Sung Jin-Woo realizes that Lee has just awakened his powers. The story fast forwards to 2 years later, where Sung Jin-Woo, on his way to college, sees a dungeon gate open. The way is blocked by some officials who are guiding people to stay clear of the area because a gate was opened, and some hunters had entered this gate to the dungeon to clear it. If they don't clear the dungeon on time, the monsters from that dungeon will overrun the place and harm everyone. So, the people stand there waiting for the hunters to finish the raid and return to this world. We see one detective asking another person how long it has been since the hunters went into the dungeon, to which the person replies that it has been 8 hours because it was a D-grade gate, but they will be back out at any moment. We are told that these gates started to appear 3 years ago, changing everything. Monsters from those gates started appearing and harming humans. To defend themselves, humans also changed. Some people randomly started to gain superhuman powers, like super strength, speed, and magical abilities. The amount of power these people received varied, so they were divided into different ranks. It was impossible to predict where these gates would appear or how long this threat would last. One person named Woo Jin-chul formed the Hunter Association and started gathering awakened humans. After that, being a hunter became a profession, and people felt a lot safer knowing that hunters were out there to protect them in case more gates appeared. Humans were divided into 2 different categories, awakened and non-awakened. Our main protagonist, Sung Jin-Woo, has not awakened his powers yet. We see him sitting in his class, painting and thinking about his past. He reflects on how he was bullied by his classmate Lee and says that no matter how much a non-awakened human tries and works hard, they can never compete with an awakened person. A non-awakened person can't even compete against an E-ranked hunter. If the hunters did not stop the monsters coming from the gates, the world would end. A non-awakened person can't survive without an awakened person, but an awakened person can survive without a non-awakened. This is why he wants to be like the hunters, because they make everyone else feel safe. On the other hand, he feels his survival is dependent on others and feels powerless. He thinks of his father and wonders how he would have handled this helpless situation. Suddenly, Sung Soo-ho hears a voice calling his name and sees that his art instructor is standing behind him. The instructor asks him what he was painting and comments that he looks really focused today. Sung Soo-ho reveals that he has made a humanoid ant. Sung Soo-ho is also confused about why he drew this and why he didn't notice it while drawing. After that, we see the scene from outside Sung Soo-ho's college, where the hunters are returning from the gate after completing the dungeon raid. Everyone is very happy to see them coming out unscathed. We see a worker telling the leader of the hunter team, named Kim, that they did a great job clearing the dungeon. Kim replies that they have successfully cleared the dungeon but have some important information to relay to the Hunter Association. They had faced off with a new type of monster in the dungeon. Those monsters were humanoid and had blue flames coming out of their bodies. These monsters were not as strong compared to the other monsters they had faced in the past. Kim also said that he was only scratched by them and it's not a big deal. But little did he know that the scratch he received in that raid was going to be the reason for everyone's death. The worker replies that maybe those are some new types of monsters they haven't encountered before and expresses relief that they weren't that dangerous. But suddenly, the scratch that Kim had received from the fight starts to glow, and he begins to feel weird. The people there do not notice anything until the worker standing near Kim notices something is wrong and asks Hunter Kim if he is okay. By then, Kim has completely transformed into a monster, with the same blue flames coming out of his body like the monsters in the dungeon. Hunter Kim grabs the worker and bites him. Everyone else standing there is shocked by the scene, and one person in their party shouts that these flames are just like those beasts they saw in the dungeon. They realize what is going on, and everyone starts running to save their lives. But Hunter Kim bites another person, and he gets infected as well. Gradually, everyone there gets infected by the virus, and all this commotion attracts the attention of Sung Soo-ho and his teacher. The whole class runs to the window to see what is going on outside, and to their horror, they see everyone attacking each other. They see the street flooded with monsters, and everyone bitten starts acting like the other monsters with flames coming out of their bodies. A girl standing next to Sung Soo-ho asks if this is a dungeon break. Some students suggest they should run, but others say they should wait for the hunters to arrive. Sung Soo-ho asks his instructor, Lin, who is awakened, why he isn't doing anything. Lin replies that he is only an E-rank awakened and can't do anything in this situation. Sung Soo-ho sees an infected person in front of their building, staring at them. Before anyone can react, the infected jumps at their building, smashing through the window and attacking everyone. All the students scatter to save themselves. As Sung Soo-ho is running, he sees a girl on the ground who is hurt and unable to stand. She asks Sung Soo-ho for help, but Soo-ho, scared, tells her to wait as he will bring back help and runs from there. The girl keeps asking for his help. While running, Sung Soo-ho thinks about what he has done. He left that girl back there to die, but as a non-awakened person, there was nothing he could do. A non-awakened person is no match for a monster. He thinks about his father and what he would have done in this situation. He sees a flashback from his past when he dreamed of the same thing as he was experiencing in the present. That dream, to him, was like a game where he had awakened his powers and fought with monsters that grew stronger with every passing floor. Sung Soo-ho kept leveling up and fought his way through them. He thought he didn't need any weapons or help as he was strong enough on his own to defeat all these monsters, but as he progressed through the floors, the monsters got even stronger, forcing Soo-ho to get even stronger as well. After overcoming these numerous challenges, he fought countless monsters in these dungeon floors and eventually managed to reach the final floor, where he faced the final boss, who was incredibly powerful. In that dream, for some reason, the final boss he was supposed to face was none other than his father. Sung Soo-ho believed that he projected his father's perception into his dream because he thought of his father as a very strong person. The flashback ends, and we see Sung Soo-ho picking up a fire extinguisher and charging toward the same room where the injured girl was, intending to save her. After reaching her, he bashes the monster's face with the fire extinguisher, saving the girl and diverting his attention towards himself. After that, he thinks about how he is going to get out of this situation, as attacks without mana don't do damage to monsters. As he is thinking this, Suho notices that time has stopped and sees a notification screen in front of him that says, "You have met all of the requirements to complete the secret quest, Courage of the Weak. You now qualify to become a player. Do you accept?" Suho is confused as to what is going on. Why has time stopped, and why are these notifications showing up in front of him? He thinks of his dream and realizes that this feels just like that dream, and if things play out as they did in that dream, then there's no reason not to accept this hopeless situation. So, he says he accepts. With a flash of light, another notification pops up in front of him, congratulating him for becoming a player, and he receives a quest reward, Secret Quest, Courage of the Weak. With that, he is gifted a blessing by the great spellcaster Candiary. He also receives a status effect, Longevity, meaning that Suho will be immune to all diseases, poison, and status effects, and will have explosive regenerative abilities when sleeping. The system also warns him that this is not a dream, and he only has one life, so he must exercise caution. A status window opens, showing Suho all his current stats. Suho gets happy after seeing the status window, thinking that he can get even stronger by leveling up. A final notification pops up, giving him a quest to take down the Mistburn and level up. After that, Suho notices that time has started again, and everyone is moving, including the Mistburn that he had struck earlier. He sees a text prompt on top of the Mistburn in front of him that indicates their ranks. He tells the girl behind him to run. Suho looks at the monsters, seeing 2 unawakened Mistburn and 1 D-rank awakened Mistburn. The 2 unawakened Mistburn run towards Suho, but he easily defeats them by hitting one with the fire extinguisher in the face and punching the second one through the roof. Suho is surprised to see his strength. A notification pops up, telling him he has defeated an unawakened Mistburn, and he was also surprised thinks he defeated that monster with 1 punch. Happy with his newfound power, he kicks another Mistburn, neutralizing him with 1 hit. A new notification opens, telling him he has leveled up, and this phase of the tutorial and he has reached level 2. He receives the quest completion reward, but he completely ignores it, thinking that he is strong enough. He launches an attack on the final Mistburn, but that Mistburn was a D-ranked awakened Mistburn, and Suho's punch had no effect on him. The Mistburn attacks Suho, scratching his chest. Suho kicks him to create some space between them and sees the damage done to his body. He is sure that now he is going to turn into a Mistburn as well because he has seen how the virus spreads by getting bitten or scratched. He thinks to himself that he has just awakened his powers, yet he is about to get monsterized. Another notification shows up, warning him that a harmful status effect has been detected in his body, but through the effect of longevity, the blessing he received earlier, all status effects have been neutralized. He sees his wounds getting healed. In the midst of that, he didn't realize that the D-rank Mistburn was charging toward him. The Mistburn grabs him and pins him to the ground. Suho struggles to get him off of himself and realizes that if he was weaker than a D-rank awakened, that meant he was just an E-rank. As the Mistburn gets closer to his face, he thinks there has to be a way out of this and suddenly remembers the notification that he ignored earlier, telling him that he had gotten rewards from leveling up. Suho accepts the rewards and sees a window showing him that he had gotten some points to increase his strength. He puts some of his points into strength and kicks the Mistburn off of himself with all his might. The Mistburn gets up and is swiftly punched by Suho in the face again, but even this time, it wasn't enough to hurt this D-ranked Mistburn. The Mistburn attacks Suho again, scratching him, but because of his longevity status, he manages to survive the hit. Suho thinks that if this wasn't enough to defeat this Mistburn, then he will have to put all of his points into strength. As he does that, he thinks that he has never heard of an awakened who can level up before, as their rank is decided the moment they awaken, and no awakener can become stronger than their rank. He punches the D-rank Mistburn again in the face, and this time, he manages to hurt it. He keeps on attacking, while thinking that he has gained the power to escape this damned system, and unlike other awakeners, he can increase his strength and keep getting stronger. He punches the D-ranked Mistburn with all his strength, launching it through a concrete wall. As he stands there, completely exhausted from that battle, he sees a notification congratulating him on defeating a D rank awakened Mistborn, and he has received a bunch of level up points from that fight. Suho sits there, thinking that he has won, and says that with this, he is also awakened. He gets up, happy, thinking that he can now save other people and put an end to this disaster since he is awakened now. But he didn't notice that another awakened Mistborn had spotted him in the building and was approaching him. The Mistborn launched itself toward the building while Suho was assessing the situation outside, but by the time Suho noticed this Mistborn, it was too late. The monster was already at his face. As this awakened Mistborn got closer to Suho, he saw the prompt on top of him stating that it was a C rank awakened Mistborn, even stronger than the one he had just faced. The Mistborn attacks, and we see an explosion in that part of the building. We see the chaos that had taken place in the city. The army had arrived to try and handle the situation but was unable to take down these monsters on their own and were waiting for the hunters dispatched by the Hunter Association to arrive. One of the soldiers reports to their superior officer, telling him the Hunter Association is having a hard time finding hunters who are B rank and above. In response, the commanding officer replies that this was only a D rank dungeon, but the soldier mentions that the Hunter Association is taking the infected hunters into account. The officer responds in disbelief that even a C-ranked hunter was also infected. Meanwhile, we see the same C-rank infected staring at Sung Suho, who was surprised to see that this Mistborn had jumped up here from the floor below. Sung Suho sees the rank of this monster above his head, realizing this was a C-rank awakened, and he was also holding a weapon. He thinks this one is different from the other monsters, but instead of trying to run away, he thinks he had just leveled up, so he was going to try and fight this thing. Instantly, the Mistborn swings his sword, almost cutting Sung Suho in two, but Suho manages to dodge the strike just in time. The wall behind Suho gets split in two. Suho stands there in disbelief, and the monster gets ready to attack again. As he swings his sword, Sung Suho jumps to save himself from the hit, and the fire extinguisher that Suho was holding explodes. Sung Suho uses this distraction to run away. He thinks it's impossible to win against something like that, and there was a reason that the awakened were divided into ranks. He thinks if he just waits for the hunters to arrive, he could survive this. Behind Suho, we see the Mistborn come out of the classroom and start to smirk, looking out the window. Suho wonders what he was up to and suddenly notices three girls standing on the roof of the next building. The girls look scared, seeing all these monsters running rampant around their school, and fail to notice the Mistborn that has just jumped toward them. By the time anyone could react, it was all over, and we see Suho standing there in disbelief as he just witnessed those innocent girls getting killed by this monster. He gets furious and jumps to the roof after the Mistborn, thinking there was no time to wait for the hunters to arrive. He kicks the awakened Mistborn behind its head, but an attack like that has no effect on a C-ranked Mistborn. The monster stands there smirking. The monster swings his sword again at Suho, and he jumps back to dodge it. He knows that even a single hit from that thing is enough to kill him. He sees the pool of blood on the floor and gets ready to fight, saying he can't let this guy run loose. He starts delivering a series of punches on the monster while dodging its strikes and finally leaps in the air to deliver a knee to its face, but all that had no effect on this monster. The Mistborn manages to land a solid strike on Suho, launching him several feet away. As he hits the wall, blood starts to come out of his mouth. Suho sits there, accepting defeat. He sees his HP has dropped down to 1 and thinks that he got lucky and that this system doesn't want him dead yet. As the Mistborn gets ready to deliver the final strike, we see a crack in some kind of a wall. Suho stands up, accepting his fate, and the monster runs towards him with full force. As it was about to strike Suho down, the wall breaks, and a humanoid monster appears in front of Suho. The monster starts to heal Suho and says he was too late. The monster looks behind him at the one responsible for Suho's condition, gets furious, and blows that C-ranked Mistborn away with one hit. Suddenly, we see all the monsters in the area start to explode. This humanoid monster was so strong that he killed all the infected in the city in no time. The military was standing there, shocked, trying to figure out what was going on. Why all these Mistborns were just exploding into pieces. After clearing the city from the infected, we see the monster kneeling down in front of Suho, saying that it has been a while and calls him the young monarch. We see Su-ho as a child, who was making drawings. He had made an ant, and we see a demonic foot in front of Su-ho, but instead of getting scared, he gets excited. The demonic figure picks up the drawing that Su-ho had made, calls him Lord, and asks him if it was him in that drawing. We are shown the face of the monster, and it was the same monster that had saved Su-ho from the C-rank mist burn. The story fast forwards to the present, where we see an injured Su-ho in a hospital, who had no memory of how he got there or who saved him. We see Su-ho on a call with his uncle, who is furious to hear what had happened to his nephew. He asks him if he was hurt badly, to which Su-ho replies that he was fine, and we come to know that Su-ho had been unconscious for 2 days. He sees the news where everyone was concerned with the recent events that had taken place. The discovery of the mist burn and the fact that they can even corrupt and turn hunters into monsters had the public frightened. At the same time, everyone was furious at the fact that the Hunter Association did not respond in time despite the incident occurring in the middle of the city. Finally, there was the mystery of how all the mist burns ended up dead by the time the hunters arrived. One survivor of the attack tells the news that he saw the demonified people explode in front of him. The scene shifts to Su-ho, who was thinking that his awakening wasn't a dream and that he was really awakened. To make things better, unlike other awakened, he can level up and get stronger. But then he thinks to himself that he was hurt while fighting a C-rank awakened mist burn. How did he survive that? He suddenly hears a voice replying to him that Beru was the one who took care of those mist burns. We see a shadow emerging from below Su-ho's bed, and we see an ant head telling Su-ho that it's been a while since he greeted him and bursts into tears. Su-ho sits there shocked as his childhood memories come back after seeing this monster, and he says that he remembers this ant. He says that Beru was one of the black lifeforms that accompanied him in his childhood and wonders how he forgot it until now. Beru tells him that he had jumped through dimensions to meet him, while Su-ho, completely ignoring Beru, was thinking about why he was living with these black creatures in the first place. He asks Beru what happened to him and why he was so small, and Beru replies by telling him that most of his energy was spent jumping through dimensions. Su-ho tells him that the status window says that Beru was only a regular grunt. Beru gets furious listening to that and curses the system, saying he was a martial rank, not a grunt. Su-ho stands up from the bed and asks him if he was the one who healed him and saved his life, to which Beru replies, yes, and tells him that he is a really skilled healer. Beru tells him that the main reason he came to him was to break the seal that stopped Su-ho from using his powers, but Su-ho managed to break it himself, and Beru was impressed. Su-ho was confused by what he was talking about and asks Beru about the seal and if it has something to do with his dream. Beru tells him that those were no dreams, those events were real, and he tells him he was a lot stronger in the past when he fought against Beru. He tells him that the great shadow monarch, Sung Jin-Woo, sealed away Su-ho's memories and powers so he could live a normal life. Su-ho was shocked after hearing his father's name and finding out his father was the one who sealed away his memories. He grabs Beru and asks how he knew his father and where he was. Beru replies that his father didn't leave him, he left for space. Su-ho asks him to explain himself, and Beru tells him his father, the great shadow monarch, is fighting a war in space against invaders who seek to take over the world. He tells Su-ho about the Atarim, who sent out their apostles to attack their world. He tells Su-ho that he had to tear apart countless enemies on his journey here to meet Su-ho, and he tells Su-ho that the reason that the gates started to appear on Earth must be caused by the war as well. Su-ho was silently listening to Beru and asks him about his mother, if she was also in space with his father. Beru, surprised, asks why Su-ho asked him that question. Su-ho tells him that she went missing the same day his dad disappeared, so he assumed that they were together. Beru gets shocked after hearing this because he thought that Su-ho's mother was on Earth with him. We see an angry Su-ho asking Beru if this all was caused by this Atarim and if they were the reason he was separated from his parents. Beru asks him if he wants to meet his parents, to which Su-ho replies, of course, he has spent so many years by himself. Beru tells Su-ho that his father can't return to Earth until this war is over, so Su-ho has to become stronger to find out about the whereabouts of his mother. Beru whips out a key and hands it over to Su-ho, telling him, let's start leveling up. We see a screen open up in front of Suho, showing him a quest. You are the son of the great Shadow Monarch. Your skills are currently sealed away. To channel your power once more, you must prove that you are worthy. Head into the Shadow Dungeon and prove yourself. Suho grabs the key, and an interface opens up showing the details of the key. Item: the key to the Shadow Dungeon. Acquisition difficulty: unknown. Type: the key allows you to enter the Shadow Dungeon. You can use this on Sung Suho's shadow. Beru tells Suho to stick that key in his shadow. Suho does as Beru asked him to do, puts the key in his shadow, turns it, and sees a door opening in front of him. Beru asks Suho to enter the door and take back what is rightfully his. As Suho is standing there, still in disbelief, he thinks about everything that Beru has told him and starts getting ready to enter the dungeon. As he thinks of his parents, he says he will level up as much as he has to in order to meet his parents again. We see a flashback of when Suho's father asks Beru to go to Earth and undo Suho's seal. He was concerned that the Ataram's invasion may have reached Earth, so he wants Beru to return Suho's memories and powers to him and help him defend Earth. He tells Beru to work out the details based on Earth's current condition. As they were about to enter the dungeon, Beru says that he will always stay by Suho's side to watch him grow. The gate closes as they come out of the other side. Beru tells Suho that this was the land of the dead, where no living being can enter without the owner's permission, and it is called the Shadow Dungeon. As Suho entering the land of the dead, Suho comments about the place, saying that it looks more like a ruined city than a dungeon. He was getting a familiar feeling from this place, as this wasn't his first time being here, and a quest opened up in front of him. Survive the dungeon for the allotted duration and prove your worth. Required time: 4 hours. Suho asks Beru if he really has to survive this dungeon for 4 hours, and Beru tells him to be on his guard. We see a monster standing and observing them both from a distance. The monster launches toward Suho, but in the nick of time, Suho notices it and dodges the attack while kicking the demon away. It was a goblin scout. Beru tells Suho that a scout means there may be more nearby, so Suho says that if this is a scout, he will finish him off quickly before he calls for reinforcements. The scout is about to call for reinforcements, but Suho manages to stop him and snatches his axe. A notification opens up, telling him that he has acquired a goblin stone axe. He strikes the goblin in the head with the axe, killing him on the spot. Another notification opens up, telling him that he has defeated a goblin scout. Suho finds out that monsters stronger than him have colored names showing over their heads. Suddenly, they notice another scout sitting on a pole, and he manages to call for reinforcements. Suddenly, a horde of goblins appears. Suho, scared, asks Beru if he will help in this fight. Beru tells him that, being so far away from the monarch, his mana isn't being replenished, so he must preserve as much strength as possible. He also tells Suho that even if he intervenes in this battle, the experience gained by Suho will be greatly decreased. While they are talking, the goblins start to attack, and Suho excitedly says he wants to try the new weapon he has obtained and calls it to him. He throws the axe, and it slices through a bunch of goblins and returns to Suho. This was another ability that Suho obtained when he awakened his powers. A goblin shoots an arrow at Suho, but he easily grabs it and launches it back at the goblin. While Beru is observing all this, he is really impressed by Suho's adaptability. Beru remembers that even as a child, Suho was able to use the ruler's authority as he pleased, but back then, this power was too dangerous. As Suho was effortlessly defeating the horde of goblins, he gained a level. He got distracted by that and was stabbed in the back by one of the goblins. Suho punches him in the face and rips the knife out of his back. As all the goblins start to attack him, we see Suho going berserk in the fight. He keeps slicing through all the goblins, and during that fight, he learns a new skill, resilience, and gains a bunch of levels. After an intense battle with the goblins, we see a tired Suho sitting on top of a car. He has survived the dungeon for all 4 hours. Beru praises him, telling him that he is amazing and that Beru never doubted him. But Suho replies with anger, telling him he didn't help him until the end. Suho sees a notification telling him he has received some rewards for completing the quest. He got a rune stone that grants the ability of shadow extraction. He asks Beru if he can learn the shadow extraction skill by using this rune stone. He remembers he had also gained another skill while fighting called resilience, which increased Suho's physical defense by 20%. While talking, Beru explains to Suho that the level-up mechanism is based on the system the monarch used in the past. It is a support system designed to ensure your safety as you grow. Suho takes out the rune, and a text tells him to break it in order to absorb its power. Suho breaks the rune, and instructions pop up in front of him, explaining how this ability works and the failure rate of the extraction, which will increase relative to the stats of the target and time since death. Suho sees a dead goblin near him and decides to turn him into a shadow soldier. As he tries to use the ability, another text appears in front of him, telling him to specify a designated command for the shadow extraction skill. He uses the word, arise. We see 3 dead goblins getting up, but they are much weaker and smaller compared to when they were alive. Suho thinks it's not as cool as he thought. Beru tells Suho that the freshly extracted shadow warriors are usually weaker than when they were alive. Suho also finds out they disappear after a day. Beru explains that this stat is affected by the person's intelligence stat and level, and as he levels up, so will shadow extraction. Suho tells Beru that he has not eaten in 2 days and asks him how they get out of this dungeon. Beru tells him to use the shadow dungeon key to open a gate to leave the dungeon. In the next scene, we see Suho enjoying a meal as Beru tells him he needs to explain what Suho needs to do from here on out. There are 3 responsibilities entrusted to them. 1. They need to protect Earth from the monsters beyond, and Suho will level up as he defeats more enemies, making Earth naturally safer. 2. They need to find out where Suho's mother is. To find her, they need to look for clues in the dungeons. 3. Most importantly, they need to restore Beru's power because he hates being weak and wants to show Suho what his true power is like. Suho asks Beru what they need to do in order to restore his power. Beru explains that he used to consume dead enemies to restore his mana before turning into a shadow warrior. However, since he can't receive magic from the monarch now, he needs to consume anything that has magic. This means Beru also has to go into the dungeon. Suho finishes eating and tells Beru they need to get ready. Beru tells Suho that if he wants to enter the dungeon, he needs to be approved as a hunter, so he needs to get his magic level measured. Suho thinks he is an awakened being who has leveled up and expects to be an S-rank hunter. To his disappointment, his mana measurements are super low, and he ends up being an E rank. Suho is embarrassed after seeing the results and walks out of the building. Outside, Beru tells him that a hunter's rank is determined by the amount of magic they have, and since Suho only focused on raising his strength stat, he ended up being measured as an E rank hunter. Suho stands there thinking if an E rank like him can protect Earth. Beru reminds him he can always level up. Suho tells Beru that E rank and F rank hunters have a hard time getting selected by the strike team. However, he remembers that there are other roles available for low-level awakened individuals. The strike team focuses on clearing the monsters in the dungeon, while the collecting team collects the bodies of the monsters. At the very back is the mining team, gathering resources from the dungeons. Of the 3 roles, E-rank hunters can apply for the collecting and mining teams. Thus, even E-rank hunters are able to enter the dungeon. In the next scene, we see Suho inside a dungeon working as a miner. He thanks someone for introducing him to the team and tells him he had just become awakened, and this person was the only other awakened he knew. We see it was his art instructor from his college. He also managed to survive that attack and was working as a miner with the hunters. He apologizes to Suho for what happened that day at the university, when instead of helping others, he ran away from the scene. Suho replies by telling him to raise his head because he was only an E rank and was no match for those monsters. The Hunter Association instructed E ranks like him to run away when they see monsters. He was just doing as instructed. His instructor is shocked after hearing that Suho is only an E rank and is even weaker than him, because he saw Suho fighting a C rank Mist Burn. Beru appears and tells him that Suho is really incredible. He looks at Beru and gets scared, starting to scream, and calling him a monster before falling to the ground. But he sees Suho and Beru taking it casually. Suho asks him why he suddenly appeared, and Beru replies that he thinks Suho is very weak and needs protection to ensure his safety. The instructor thinks that Suho awakened as a summoner-type hunter and that this monster is one of his. He tells Suho that most E ranks won't have any skills, so it's fortunate he has a running skill. Suho makes fun of him, asking if that's why he was able to escape so well, and the instructor gets embarrassed. Suho tells him he was just joking. Suho thinks to himself that this is his first time in a dungeon other than the Shadow Dungeon and wonders if the assault team is hunting beasts up ahead. The scene shifts to the hunter assault team discussing that this dungeon is empty and they have only faced wolf beasts so far. They are disappointed because the wolf pelt isn't worth much. One of them tells the others to keep searching for these wolves because there is a chance they might find a magic crystal. One of the hunters finds a secret passage and informs the party about it. The party enters the room and sees a strange-looking structure ahead. One of the hunters suggests they should request some support from outside, but another hunter replies that there is no need, as his detection skill has not picked up any signs of monsters in the room. They see a sword in the center of the room and get excited. One of the hunters, named Kim Yongjun, starts reaching for the sword to pull it out of the ground without listening to the other hunters who think this might be a trap. He ignores their warnings, telling them that he is AC rank and can handle any traps. As he is pulling the sword, we see teeth coming out of the ground, and a monster swallows him whole. That was a hallucination in his head, as the other hunters did not see anything. But as he pulls the sword out of the ground, the others do not notice that Kim was already possessed by a demon who, in a fit of fury, kills one of the hunters with one swing of the sword. The other hunters look on in horror while the possessed Kim stands there, staring at them with anger. We see hunters shocked and scared by what just happened. One of their teammates was killed in front of them, while one member of their party, AC rank hunter, gets possessed after pulling a sword from the ground. They start running, trying to save their lives, but are easily killed by the possessed C rank hunter. The scene then shifts to Suho, who is busy mining resources from the dungeon. He has summoned the goblins he acquired earlier from the Shadow Dungeon to do the work, allowing him to rest. Seeing this, his instructor comments that summoners can typically only summon 1 or 2 monsters at most, and notes that Suho's power is abnormal. Suho is pleased because his shadow soldiers are doing all the work while he relaxes. He praises Beru for being right about shadow extraction being a useful skill, though Beru, annoyed, tells him not to praise him while making him do the dirty work. Seeing Suho's skills, the other workers become motivated as well. Suho tells Beru that, since the hunter ranking system is new, the measurement device still has many errors. Therefore, he plans to level up his mana and retake his measurement test. He reminds Beru of their third mission to restore his powers and explains that the stones they are mining contain magic power. He asks Beru to start eating the fragments on the ground to restore his mana. While eating, Beru suddenly feels the presence of someone strong nearby and tells Suho that he just sensed the presence of a monarch in the dungeon. Suho is shocked and wonders if it might be his father, but Beru tells him it is someone else. If it were Suho's father, his power would have been instantly restored. The other workers sense danger and hear a sound from the direction where the raid party went. They get nervous when they see glowing eyes in the dark. Before they can figure anything out, it's too late, the monsters are already in front of them. Everyone becomes scared and confused as to why the monsters are all the way there. They start to run, but one of the workers gets trapped and is unable to escape. He tries hitting the monster but is too weak. As he thinks he is going to die, tears start coming out of his eyes. But before the monster can strike, Suho runs in, saving the worker. He shouts for everyone to evacuate while he buys them time. Suho looks at the color of the names of the monsters and realizes they are D rank, the same as the mist beasts he fought at the art university. He thinks he can defeat them alone, especially since he is not alone and sees the instructor behind him, who didn't run with the other workers. The instructor tells him that he wasn't going to run this time. Suho replies by asking him to help when he is in danger. The instructor looks at Suho, who has summoned another 3 goblins. Suho opens his inventory and pulls out a sword he acquired from the Shadow Dungeon. The instructor is shocked to see that Suho can even summon weapons. Suho charges at the wolf beast, killing one effortlessly, while the instructor and the goblins witness his power. Suho uses shadow extraction on the dead wolf while fighting off the other 2, causing one of the goblins to disappear, as he can only have 3 shadow soldiers at most. We see Beru observing Suho fight, impressed by his ability. Suho realizes that extraction and summoning do not use mana. As his magical power increases and the number of extractions he can perform grows, he can even create an army. He kills the remaining wolves and uses shadow extraction on one of them, causing the second goblin to disappear while the third goblin warrior, scared, waits for its turn. Suho also gains a level from this. He completely forgot about the instructor, who was watching all this. The instructor asks how an E rank can possess such strength and the ability to command dead monsters. Suho replies that he is a pretty good E rank. The instructor thinks Suho might have intentionally hidden his powers. A new quest opens up for Suho, stating that an entity with murderous intent towards the player has been detected nearby. He must secure his safety by defeating it. Suho looks around the dungeon, thinking he has already defeated all the lichens, and wonders what else could be in there. We see the possessed C-rank hunter approaching from the darkness. The instructor starts thinking it is one of the hunters and begins explaining that they were attacked by monsters and barely survived. Suho tries to stop him, warning that it is dangerous. The possessed hunter swings his sword at the instructor, almost hitting him, but Suho manages to pull him back just in time. Suho takes the unconscious instructor to the side, reflecting on how hunters turning into monsters has become a trend. He notices the color of the possessed hunter's name is red, meaning he is much more powerful compared to Suho. He recalls that the previous enemy with the same colored name was extremely difficult to defeat. He asks Beru if this enemy is truly a monarch like his father. Beru replies that it has power, but is far from being a monarch, and warns Suho that it is not an opponent he can handle at this stage. Suho, ignoring the warning, opens his inventory, stating that the system is an auxiliary device to help him grow steadily. If it gave him a quest, it means there is a possibility of winning. He says he needs to get stronger quickly to meet his father and prepares to fight. Beru is watching him, thinking, despite facing many trials several times until now, the young monarch never runs away. He says he can see the image of Suho's father in him. He tells Suho that the enemy's true form is a sword and that they need to separate it from the host by cutting off its arm. As the possessed hunter gets close to Suho, he is surrounded by Suho's shadow soldiers. Suho stands tall, telling Beru that the soldiers really do get back up if he uses some mana. Beru asks Suho if he likes the power of shadow soldiers, but Suho replies by asking him what kind of shadow soldiers he is talking about, as the possessed hunter is easily cutting through them. Beru, annoyed, tells him that's because Suho's mana is still weak. The hunter then asks, how can someone as insignificant as you wield the Shadow Monarch's power? Suho is surprised to find out that the sword can talk, while Beru gets angry and starts yelling at him, how dare you call the bloodline of the Shadow Monarch an insignificant creature? The demon gets excited to hear that Suho is the descendant of the Shadow Monarch and says he was lucky to meet him there. He shouts furiously that the Shadow Monarch is the nemesis of the Monarch of Fang and charges at Suho. Confidently, Suho brings out the weapons he acquired from the Shadow Dungeon and attacks the possessed hunter, but the hunter easily destroys all of them. Suho smirks, saying that he expected as much from him, knowing that the hunter handled it very easily. Suho starts to pick up all his weapons with his newly found ability, Ruler's Authority, and attacks the possessed hunter, saying that he will win by sheer volume. He begins to attack the monster from all sides. Beru watches all of this in amazement, thinking, this is the Ruler's Authority he's been using since he was a baby. While fighting, Suho gets worried that the monster is easily destroying all the weapons and getting closer to him. Suho prepares to defend himself from the strike, but the monster effortlessly destroys the sword Suho is holding in his hand with one strike, much to Suho's surprise. He starts dodging the blows, knowing full well that if he gets hit by just one of the attacks, it will be over for him. As he runs out of weapons, Suho knows that the longer the fight goes on, the fewer chances he has of victory. The possessed hunter, annoyed that he wasn't able to hit Suho, calls him a coward and shouts, "You must be a coward who hides behind his shadow soldiers," and also calls the Shadow Monarch a coward like him. Suho gets angry, telling him he shouldn't talk about someone's parent like that, and knows full well what the hunter is trying to do. So instead of attacking the monster, Suho jumps back, creating space between them. He recalls his conversation with Beru, where Beru told Suho that if his restrictions were lifted, why wouldn't his strength return that he gained while climbing the tower? Beru replies by telling him his strength was restricted when he was a baby. He explains that it is like Suho has recovered the talent he had as a child. But that place wasn't a dream or reality, it was a test to determine whether Suho could handle his talent. The enhancements of his body were going to disappear regardless of his success with the test. To put it simply, it was like a game, and his experience within the tower wasn't meaningless. Beru asks him to remember his fighting spirit and the senses he experienced in the tower. The story shifts to the present, where Suho is fighting the possessed hunter. He thinks he can definitely remember the senses from the tower, as he mainly fought with a brawling style there, and wishes he had a gauntlet like he did back then. He remembers what Beru had told him about the shadow soldiers and realizes something: these are the basics of the shadow soldiers. As long as he has mana, he can recover them forever. Suho thinks that shadow soldiers can change forms, as he has seen Beru do that, and gets an idea. He raises his shadow soldiers, calling them to him, while the possessed hunter thinks he is planning to use the soldiers to attack him again, telling Suho he hasn't learned that those tricks don't work on him. The hunter manages to close the distance between them and says he is going to finish off Suho, but little did he know that Suho wasn't aiming for him with the soldiers. Suho starts to absorb the soldiers into his arms as the monster strikes Suho with all his might. He thinks it's all over. However, he realizes that Suho is still standing and wasn't even scratched by the hit. Suho had completely absorbed his soldiers, turning them into gauntlets. A notification appears, telling Suho that his shadow extraction has leveled up and he has gained the ability to change the forms of his shadow soldiers. He deflects the sword strike with sheer strength and says that with this, he can get much closer and fight. Suho begins attacking the monster with his fists, while Beru watches in amazement, realizing that Suho is using the shadow soldiers as weapons. Beru thinks the shadow monarch, who had transcended levels, is at the point where he can use the shadow as freely as he wants, but Suho had only awakened his abilities and learned this skill on his own, without the guidance of anyone. He discovered the next level of shadow authority by himself, and the battle sense he's shown so far, his aptitude for ruler's authority, and even his method of using shadow authority, are beyond impressive. The fight continues as Suho overpowers the possessed C-rank hunter. He hits him with a punch, launching him into a wall, but that wasn't enough to finish him off. The hunter gets back up from the rubble and charges at Suho, while Suho prepares all his weapons, intending to finish the fight. They both charge at each other, and with one last attack, Suho defeats the enemy and stands victorious. Beru, amazed, says he is a true prodigy. As Suho standing victorious, looking at the defeated enemy, saying he was worried since the enemy had a red name, but he wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to defeat him. Beru replies by telling him he never doubted his abilities, and Suho tells him to stop lying. Suho looks at his new gauntlets, saying even so, he has learned a new way to fight. This was a decent harvest. He starts checking the rewards he gained from the fight, and a notification pops up, telling him he has gained a new rune stone called Storm Slash. He accepts the power and notices he needs 50 mana to use this ability. He thinks to himself, a new skill, this was the reward he wanted the most, and says he knows how to use this skill instinctively. He gets ready to test this new skill and thinks he needs a weapon to use it. Because all the weapons he gained from the Shadow Dungeon were destroyed in the fight, he plans to use the Sword of the Fang Monarch to test his new skill. While the sword is on the ground, it thinks it can't believe it lost to the descendant of the Shadow Monarch, but it thinks it's not over yet. The sword thinks that human greed is unlimited, and the moment Suho picks it up, it'll take over his mind as well. As Suho picks up the sword, instead of getting possessed like the C-rank hunter, Suho receives a notification telling him that he has obtained an item, Fang of Rakan. Suho says it definitely looks better than a goblin weapon, while the sword is shocked that there is a human whom even it, having inherited the power of the Fang Monarch, can't take over. We see the reason Suho didn't get affected by the sword was because of the blessing he received when he gained his powers that nullifies all the negative effects of diseases, poison, and status effects, and granted him explosive regeneration ability when sleeping. Suho grabs the sword and attacks the pile of stones in front of him, testing his new ability. He says it's kind of a problem that it depletes his mana with just one use, but he likes the amount of destructive power it has. Beru replies by telling him he was reacting so differently from when he saw Shadow Extraction, and that Shadow Authority is thousands of times more incredible than this. We see that the unconscious instructor starts to wake up and asks Suho what is going on, and gets scared to see the same man who tried to kill him unconscious next to him. Suho tells him, "Let's go out and talk along the way, because it'll take a while to explain everything." We see the scene outside the dungeon where more hunters had gathered around the dungeon gate, and the workers managed to get out thanks to Suho. He tells the instructor that he is going to go back into the dungeon to check if there are more survivors. As Suho enters through the gate, the instructor thinks he is an E-rank awakened who possesses a summoning skill, a minor detail, but how is Suho so strong? He looks at the survivors who were alive thanks to Suho and says, "All that is not important right now, what's important is that Suho saved all these people." The scene shifts inside the dungeon where Suho is fighting more wolf monsters and easily defeating them with his new gauntlet, gaining more levels as he does. He tells Beru that there are still quite a lot of wolf monsters in here, to which Beru replies, "They're all express, so we can't miss out on them." Suho turns his attention to the sword, asking why its attack power suddenly dropped, to which the sword replies, "Do you really think I'd work with the Shadow Monarch's descendant?" We see a text giving details of the sword, a sword made with the fang of the king of beasts, Rakan. The vengeful spirit of Rakan rests in it. When someone weak possesses it, their body may be taken over. It also gives the user a 15% chance to deal critical damage that deals double the damage. We see Beru telling the sword that its ability is more powerful when dealing with someone who's weaker than you. "It's such a dirty ability," he says. The sword replies by saying, "Which hunter in the world would hunt something that's stronger than them?" Beru responds, "Suho managed to defeat someone significantly stronger than him." While Suho is thinking, first a speaking insect and now a speaking sword, this is so confusing, he walks up to the platform where the sword was originally located, looking at all the dead hunters in the way. Beru tells him that everyone there is dead, and the sword tells them that it simply killed everyone who stepped into this place because it must protect the sanctuary of the Fang Monarch, after all. Suho grabs it and drives the sword into the ground, the blade sinking deep into the earth with a sharp, resonant thud. A notification opens in front of Suho, telling him that shadow extraction is possible on this target. He asks Beru if he can perform shadow extraction on humans too. Beru replies, "As long as it's a corpse, you can turn any of them into your own soldier." Suho reaches for the dead hunters and picks them up, taking them to the side. Beru asks him, "Are you not going to perform shadow extraction on them?" Suho replies, "If they have to fight even when they're dead, then it's basically punishing them." The sword and Beru fall silent. Suho asks Beru, "You told me this is the sanctuary of a monarch, right? What was all that about my father and Beru killing the monarch of this sanctuary? And is that related to Ataram?" Beru explains that Ataram is the current enemy of the Shadow Monarch, and the Fang Monarch was the Shadow Monarch's past enemy. He tells him there are a total of 9 monarchs, including Suho's father. He further explains that the Great Monarch of Shadow is also known as the King of the Dead, and the monarch of this sanctuary was the King of Beasts, the Fang Monarch. There is also the King of Insects called the Plague Monarch, the King of Monstrous Humanoids called the Iron Body Monarch, the King of Demons called the White Flame Monarch, the King of Giants called the Primordial Monarch, the King of Snow Folk called the Frost Monarch, the King of Demonic Specters called the Transfiguration Monarch, and the King of Dragons called the Destruction Monarch. He tells Suho that all 9 monarchs possess transcendent strength that can't be fathomed, but when 8 of the monarchs invaded Earth, they all died at the hands of Suho's father, the Shadow Monarch. Suho is surprised to hear that his father managed to kill all the other monarchs on his own. The sword tells Suho that this is the reason the Shadow Monarch is his mortal enemy, because he killed his master, the Fang Monarch. He tells Suho that if he had all his strength intact, he would tear the descendant of the Shadow Monarch to shreds and feed him to the wolves. Suho replies that he can understand his anger. His father fought the other monarchs to protect the earth, and the sword was only trying to protect this place from invaders. Both sides simply made a rational decision to protect what was precious to them. He adds, "If your duty is to protect this place, isn't it foolish to be hostile towards the Shadow Monarch, whom even the Fang Monarch couldn't defeat?" The sword gets annoyed after hearing this. Suho tells the sword that he wants to meet his parents, whom he can't meet right now because of the outer universe's invaders, and for that reason, he will borrow strength from anyone. Suho grabs the sword and tells it that the Shadow and the Fang fighting on the same battlefront would be beneficial for both. We are then shown the scene outside the dungeon, where we see Suho's art instructor sitting with some reporters as they ask him about the incident that occurred inside the dungeon. They ask him about the strike team of the D-rank dungeon that was wiped out, while we see the instructor with a cup of tea in his hand getting ready to tell them the whole story. He thinks if people see the results that Suho received, he'll be treated better even if he's an E rank. This is a good opportunity to repay his debt to Suho. On that same evening, an article was uploaded on the internet regarding an incident where an E-rank hunter went into a dungeon alone to save the hunters that were in it. In the article, there was testimony from someone who saw the heroic E-rank hunter run toward monsters to save people. There were also testimonies given by numerous people who were saved by him. The scene shifts to an office where some people are discussing that it's about time for them to get a few quarters. We are told that this is the Black Tortoise Guild's second management department. One of the people tells their superior that the collection team was angry, asking for more manpower, and he thinks they should hire a few more E-rank hunters. The supervisor says that he will send him a candidate now and ask him what he thinks of him. The man reads. An E-rank hunter who fought in a D-rank dungeon, evacuated the excavation team, and brought the injured strike team out of the dungeon. They were talking about none other than our main hero, Suho. Everyone sitting there was shocked that an E-rank hunter did that. Their supervisor tells them, if a big guild like ours recruits him, it would cause a huge commotion for sure. The man says he will try to contact him immediately. After some time one of them asks if they got a reply from Hunter Suho yet. He says, he's a newbie E rank, getting an invitation from the Black Tortoise Guild, he should be happy, but is shocked to hear that Suho rejected their offer. He is standing there trying to understand how a newbie E rank hunter rejected a large guild like them. That doesn't make any sense. His colleague replies, apparently, he doesn't want to join any guild. They underestimate Suho, saying that a hunter who doesn't want to join a guild, does he think he's an S rank or what? He assumes that he'll contact them again soon after seeing how hard it is to be a hunter without a guild. We see Suho in his home, who has been getting a lot of scouting offers from guilds ever since the news of him saving all those people in the dungeon started to spread. Beru tells him that many people want his talents, and Suho replies, they only want to hire me as a porter or collector, and wonders why there are so many of them contacting him, not knowing that this was his instructor behind his fame. He tells Beru that entering a guild will be a hindrance to leveling up with the system, so there is no reason for him to join one. He sees the Fang of Rakan and asks if it will consider his offer to create an alliance with him. The sword thinks, how can he say something so nonsensical so casually? But thinks that the Shadow can be an ally instead of an enemy on one condition. It asks Suho to bring it to another sacred ground of the Fang Monarch, only then will it consider Suho's offer. Suho asks it if it knows how to get to one, to which the sword replies it knows the location of the sacred grounds of the Fang Monarch no matter how far. The sword tells Suho it can feel that the gate that leads to it is already gone, explaining that what humans call a dungeon break must have happened. Suho tells him that the sacred site must be a field-type dungeon, explaining that it is when a dungeon break occurs at a neglected gate, and the monsters take over the land, making it barren. Suho gets ready to leave for the place, leaving a message to his uncle so he won't be worried. He gears up and they leave for the place. After reaching the location, they see that it is barricaded. Suho asks the sword if this really is the place, to which the sword replies, yes. Suho tells them both that the place is owned by another guild, and entering the area means they are trespassing, which is illegal. He adds that the Hyena Guild is made up of people who used to be in gangs, so they are all scary. Beru tells Suho that they don't need the help of the sword and suggests that Suho should just focus on leveling up. While Suho is preparing to enter the area, Beru asks him how he was going to do that, to which Suho replies, I have my ways, and destroys the camera with his powers, telling them there won't be any evidence left. He destroys the camera as they enter the place. Suho asks Beru if all field dungeons are full of blue fog, and Beru explains that this fog is mana from outer space. It breaks through dimensional walls, causing ruptures in worlds, and the sword further explains that this fog is the reason the sacred ground he was on broke through the dimension and got linked to Earth. Beru adds that entities from outer space are trying to break a big hole in the dimension to send in their armies, and the more mana a being has, the more they are affected by dimensional travel. Suho understands that it will take a while before the stronger guys are here, so he should focus on leveling up until then. As they are talking, they see they are surrounded by monsters. The Fang of Rakan gets ready to fight, and Suho is happy to see that the sword is dependable. But he tells them that he won't be using it as a main weapon and has already thought of a combat method. He'll use the hand-to-hand combat he used in the tutorial as the base and start attacking the monsters. He tells them he will use various weapons so as not to be predictable, and finally, use shadow extraction to get more equipment. This is his new way of fighting, and Beru is impressed by looking at all this, while the Fang of Rakan looks at Suho amazed, seeing the power of the Shadow Monarch's bloodline. As the more enemies there are, the longer the fight drags on, and the stronger Suho will grow by using the dead, they will lose the war. After defeating all the enemies, Suho stands there and we see he can now handle 5 shadow soldiers after increasing his intelligence level and brags about it to Beru. But Beru tells him that's nothing compared to the tens of millions of soldiers the great monarch can create, and before he finishes his sentence, he gets smacked in the head by jealous Suho. After that, we see that Suho and the gang manage to locate the gate, but they notice the members of the hyena gang. Suho thinks to himself, why are these people here at this hour? Isn't it better to subjugate magic beasts during the day? We see a car coming in. As Suho observes, he sees people being brought there, tied up. He asks Beru if he is really witnessing a human trafficking scenario right now, and Beru replies, yes, and warns Suho that right now they are trespassing, and it would be wiser not to take action. If they get caught trespassing here, the hunters, before he could finish, he noticed that Suho had already jumped in to save the captives. Beru thinks that his father, a violent crime detective, his grandfather, a legendary firefighter, and the 21-year-old Suho, who grew up watching them, all have the habit of acting first once they see injustice. Suho kicking a man in the face while Beru and the others stand there, thinking, did he really barge in the middle of so many enemies without a plan? The guild members are just as surprised to see a man jump down from the sky and kick one of their members. We see the man who got kicked almost buried in the ground. The other members ask Suho who he is while Suho is standing there hiding his face, thinking that his body moved on its own. He thinks to himself that invading another guild's territory is illegal and considers his next move. He gets an idea and uses one of his shadow soldiers, turning it into a mask, calling out the hyena guild for kidnapping people. One of the men replies by telling him that not only did he trespass on their territory, but he also started attacking them. He asks if Suho wants to die and orders the other members to tear him up. They start attacking Suho, and Suho thinks that the average rank of hyena guild members is D, so he decides not to use his full strength just in case. He punches one person, sending him flying through the air while the others stand there surprised and scared. Suho jumps at the remaining 2 members of the hyena guild and kicks them in the face. Beru thinks that Suho has become so strong that these D-rank hunters are no match for him. Suho ties up all the defeated members of the guild, and Beru tells him that it was a very clean finish. The captives thank Suho for saving their lives and ask if he is a hunter from the Hunter Association. Suho, not wanting to give away his identity, says, it's something like that. He asks them to escape to a safe place because he'll take care of things here. As the kidnapped people drive away, the sword calls Suho, telling him that it can feel something. Suho asks what he means by that. The sword replies by telling him the reason it wanted them to come here is over there. Suho opens the door to the storage room, shocked to see it filled with cages. He realizes that this is the place where the hyena guild imprisoned people, and Beru senses the energy of someone there. They see a puppy chained up in a cage. Suho thinks about what the hyena guild was trying to do, and the sword tells Suho that this isn't a puppy. This young wolf pup is the descendant of the king of beasts, the monarch of fangs. Suho is shocked to hear that. The sword tells them that right after losing the war against the Shadow Monarch, the Monarch of Fangs gave his surviving descendant a guard and evacuated it to this sanctuary. He believed that as long as his bloodline was not lost, another Monarch of Fangs would be born. But truthfully, he didn't even wish for another Monarch of Fangs to be born, he just wished that his family line wouldn't be severed. Beru tells Suho that he can feel a vague energy that used to belong to the Monarch of Fangs and asks Suho what he will do now that they have found the little puppy, as it would surely die if left here. As they are discussing this, they hear someone coming into the warehouse. The person says, "Since the guys outside were all knocked out, I thought it would at least be a few people, but it seems there's only one person here." Suho puts his mask back on, but as he turns to look at the person, he is shocked to see it as a monster. The monster says that the hyena guild was useless, just as he thought, humans couldn't be trusted. The sword recognizes the monster and calls it by its name, Brokey. Suho asks the sword if he knows him, and the sword tells him yes. The sword explains that this monster is the guard given to the descendant of the Fang. Brokey replies to the sword, saying, "It has been a while, Rakan's Fang. You were alive as well." The sword gets furious and asks Brokey if he has forgotten that he was sent in order to protect the descendant and what he has been doing for things to come to this state. Brokey, ignoring the sword, approaches Suho and says, "How dare you put your hands on my possession?" He takes the puppy from Suho while Suho thinks he's fast, and strikes Suho, launching him through the wall and a couple of containers. As Suho sits there in pain, Beru asks him if he is alright. Suho replies, "Among all the hits I've taken recently, that one hurts the most." Beru tells him that his head is bleeding. Suho asks Beru not to shout as his head is ringing. Suho notices that his skill resilience has leveled up, increasing his physical defense from 20% to 40%. Beru tells him that when they arrived at this place, there was a vague energy left behind, and he has now ascertained what that was. He tells Suho it is Itarim, and Suho gets furious after hearing that name. Beru tells him he can feel Itarim's energy from this guy. Back in the warehouse, we see the sword confronting Brokey, asking if he even knows what he's doing to a monarch's descendant. Brokey replies, telling him, "How do you think, after losing the sanctuary, I was able to maintain this amount of power?" As the survival of the fittest statement goes, only the strong survive. The survival of the weak depends solely on the strong. Also, it is the law of nature that the weak become nutrition for the strong. Although this fellow is weak, its origin stems from being family to the Monarch of Fangs and is the optimal source of nutrition. Brokey says that is the reason he has been consuming the descendant of the Fang. He periodically consumes the blood of the descendant, which contains the monarch's bloodline. Brokey tells the sword that he'll make sure to kill him and that there is nothing a half-blood like him can do. He goes on to say that the fact that Rakan died is just proof that he was weak and that he who has survived can actually be called strong, the most fitting to be called the next Monarch of Fangs. Before he can finish, Suho arrives and attacks Brokey's arm, freeing the descendant from his grasp. Brokey looks at his injured arm. Suho calls the sword to his hand and tells it, "It seems you're quite furious at the bastard. Now I also happen to have something to do with him." This is the first alliance between the Shadow and the Fang. Finally, Suho has found a clue that connects to his father. We see a furious Brokey preparing to attack and who says he is going to kill Suho. A new quest opens up in front of Suho, telling him to hunt the hyena and secure his safety. Beru carries the little puppy to safety while thinking he can't help but stand by and watch as Suho and Brokey face off, ready to fight. Suho calls him Hyena Brokey, and says he thinks he knows where they got the guild name from. He wonders how a monster created a guild while also kidnapping people and questions if this could be related to Itarim. As they are about to fight, one of the tied-up guild members asks Brokey to untie them so they can help him defeat Suho, warning him that Suho is stronger than he looks. Suho says, "I won't just stand by and watch that happen." Instead of helping them, Brokey devours them all in one bite. Suho is shocked to see this. Brokey says, "Thinking that I'd need help facing a guy like that. Those who don't even know their place are mere prey." Suho charges at Brokey in anger, but Brokey effortlessly blocks his attack. Suho says, You killed people just for that reason, to which Brokey replies, the power of life and death over the weak belongs to the strong. You think a reason is required for the strong to do what they want. He then launches Suho away with his attack. Suho gets back up and charges at Brokey again. They start to exchange blows, with Brokey having the upper hand. Suho strikes Brokey from above using the Storm Slash ability, but it has no effect on Brokey. Brokey asks, is that all you've got? The name of the monarch of Fang's relic will cry, but to his surprise, he gets attacked from the back. The sword manages to stab him in the back. Suho tells him, it's not over yet, and attacks Brokey again. The sword asks, why have you changed like this? You who swore loyalty and honored Sir Rakan, why have you changed like this? As Brokey starts to remember his vows to the monarch, something takes over him again. He manages to grab the sword and break it, smashing it on the ground. He shouts, I hold no respect for him. I had only surrendered to Rakan's strength at that time. Do you think I will continue to live such a weak life? Suho is shocked to see the sword break and gets punched in the stomach by Brokey, who tells him, this isn't the time for you to be worrying about someone else, you little worm. Suho is in excruciating pain after receiving that blow, but he thinks of his father, who could be fighting somewhere else right now. Suho stands his ground, calling his shadow soldiers and making a gauntlet, and starts hitting Brokey. They exchange blows while the destroyed sword is on the ground, and its strength starts to leak out from the broken body. It thinks about whether it will get destroyed just like this and realizes that the survival of the descendant and the Fang's future depends solely on Suho. The sword says it wants to fight more and notices the descendant trying to stand up, who was inspired by Suho's fighting spirit. It decides to give the rest of its strength to the descendant. Brokey manages to knock Suho away, who is on the brink of death. Brokey approaches Suho, praising him for holding on for this long. As he is about to land the final blow, the descendant of the Fang monarch swoops in, saving Suho. Suho is surprised to see him, and so is Brokey. A notification opens up, telling Suho that the Fang descendant pays tribute to the player's fighting spirit. Do you want to recruit the Fang descendant as a colleague? Suho realizes that this is the Fang descendant. Brokey asks if he absorbed mana from Rakan's Fang, and Suho realizes that Rakan's Fang sacrificed itself to save the descendant. He sees the notification asking if he wants to recruit the Fang's descendant as a colleague. He thinks that since he was going to cooperate with the Fang from the beginning, he has no reason to refuse, so he accepts. As he does, he starts to see the memories of the descendant. Suho sees that the descendant is sitting with Brokey, who tells him that they have lost the war against the Shadow Monarch. He explains that the world follows the rule of survival of the fittest. Since they have lost, they will lose many things. He tells the descendant to make sure to become strong so the Fang prospers. The memories shift to the time when the dungeon was attacked and Brokey lost to some human-looking beings. He asks them what they are and why they aren't ending him, to which they reply that he looks like a useful monster and is just what they need. They plant something in Brokey's eye and order him to capture humans alive and deliver them. They tell him that the thing planted in his eye will help him by increasing his strength. After this, Brokey changes, and Suho thinks the people who planted something into Brokey's eye are the main culprits directly related to Ataram. He understands that the Fang's descendant doesn't want to take revenge but wants to stop Brokey's rampage. He thinks that if this is somehow connected to the plane, he must defeat Brokey. He realizes he doesn't have the power to win against him. Another notification opens up, giving Suho a new quest to seek out the monarch's descendants and recruit them as colleagues. The notification shows a bond skill is formed due to the bond with the Fang descendant. We see Suho and the Fang's descendant start to glow, while Beru is witnessing this, thinking that Suho is experiencing a change different from what happened to the king. Brokey charges, saying he doesn't know what's happening, but he won't sit tight and do nothing. He punches Suho. As the dust settles, we see Suho blocking Brokey's punch with one hand. Suho had transformed, merging with the descendant of the Fang. A notification opens up, explaining that by letting the Fang's descendant dwell in your body, your physical body is enhanced and your senses become as keen as those of a beast. Brokey is surprised to see that Suho has absorbed the descendant and starts attacking him. Suho dodges his attacks effortlessly, and with the increased senses, he can perform the optimal movements to avoid danger. He kicks Brokey under his chin, who is shocked after receiving the blow. Brokey's implant starts to glow, and he says he can't lose because if he does, he loses everything. He punches Suho. Beru notices that Suho's mana increased. Enraged, he tells Suho, "I don't know what you did, but one thing's for sure, I will never lose to a human like you." In the end, the difference in power comes from the difference in species. Blame yourself for being human, an inferior species. As they clash, Suho receives a notification telling him he has learned a new skill, unarmed combat. He now does 33% additional damage to opponents when attacking using his body. Beru tells Brokey, "How dare you speak of the difference in species in front of the young monarch? There is no way anything could be above the species of the Shadow Monarch." Brokey is shocked to hear this as Suho attacks him from above, kicking him on the head and finally defeating him. He transforms back to his human form, and we see that as the effect of the implant fades away, Brokey returns to his senses. He says, "I now remember the reason why I needed to get stronger." He is furious because he couldn't protect the descendant of the Fang. As he draws his final breath, the descendant of the Fang looking at a dead Brokey as Suho and Beru stand behind him. Beru praises Suho, telling him he has done well. Suho asks him if he mentioned that he felt the Aterim's energy from Brokey and tells him he was able to momentarily look at the memories of the Fang's descendant earlier and saw hunters who entered the dungeon Brokey resided in and put something into his eye. Could these guys be the Aterim? What purpose did they have in ambushing Brokey? Suho asks. Beru tells him they're probably not the Aterim, as they wouldn't have acted by themselves. Rather, they used their apostles to interfere with causality. Their actions should be related to the invasion of this world. Suho replies, "So you're saying that Aterim's apostles are on Earth?" Suho thinks it would be great to have a little more information if it were to end here again. Beru tells him there might be a way. Brokey should have memories of the Aterim. If Beru devours his corpse, he should be able to peer into his memories. Furthermore, his mana should be restored as well. It's catching two birds with one stone. Suho is surprised that he has an ability like that. The descendant of the Fang is looking at the dead Brokey when Suho asks him if he would like to come with them. There's a place he'd like to show him, to which he agrees. Suho opens the gate to the Shadow Dungeon and asks Beru to find out about the Aterim from Brokey's memories. As they enter the Shadow Dungeon, Beru asks why they are there instead of Suho's home. Suho tells him that he was going to give the Fang's descendants a place to live. He says he is already allied with Fang anyway, and it's sad to see it without a guardian and a sanctuary. A notification opens up, telling Suho to name the descendant. Suho decides to name him Gray, as he has gray fur, which the descendant liked. Suho decides to turn the forest into the domain of the Fang. A notification opens up, telling Suho a part of the Shadow Dungeon has been designated as the domain of Fang and Gray has been designated as the master of the domain of Fang. Suho asks Beru what Gray eats. Beru tells him since it's from the Fang's lineage, it should be able to eat other lifeforms or magic beasts. Suho replies with a smirk on his face, "That's good. There are still monsters that I haven't gotten rid of here. I guess I'll ask Gray to do some cleaning up," as we see a scout listening to their conversation. Gray attacks and effortlessly starts killing all the goblins in the area as Suho and Beru are spectating from the top of a tree. Suho decides he will sort out the things he's obtained this time around. Notifications open up, showing him the quest rewards. Suho has gained the title, Wolf Slaughterer, giving him a status boost of 40% when fighting beast-type monsters. Suho thinks, Wolf Slaughterer. Was Brokey a hyena? Beru replies by telling him to overlook the trivial details. He turns his attention to the other quest he had gained when he recruited Gray, which said to find the heirs of the monarchies and recruit them as allies. It shows he has to recruit a total of 8 of them while he only has 1. Beru tells him that the level-up system that was made for Suho has been revised to a certain extent by removing the ill intentions that were within the system. Suho asks, "Ill intentions?" Beru explains that back then, the system's objective was to forcefully grow the human known as Sung Jin-Woo, and the scheme of the architect was to use him as the vessel for the Shadow Monarch. The moment that objective was achieved, Suho's father's soul was supposed to be destroyed. However, Suho's father was able to go against the goal of the system, and he became the Shadow Monarch himself and got to a level where he no longer needed to level up. Suho asks if the system is moving to allow him to become the Shadow Monarch. Beru replies, "No, there's only one Shadow Monarch in this world." He believes the system will adapt to the direction in which Suho advances and act as a guide for him, and if any new functions appear, then they must have been added to help him. Suho opens up his status window and, looking at his class, he tells Beru, "Maybe that's the reason my class is still none." He notices that his stats have gone up a lot since back when he was being chased around by the mist burn, and to think he has gained this many useful skills already. But he thinks he is still weak. Even during the recent incident, if it weren't for Gray and the bond skill that appeared, he would have lost to Brokey. He tells Beru if the quests given by the system are in line with what he wants, then he'll clear those quests for now, and in doing so, he probably will meet his parents eventually. After the conversation, Suho asks Beru if he found any traces of the Aterum in Brokey's memories just now. Beru replies, "I tried to take a look at his memories, but there were no Aterum apostles that brainwashed Brokey." Suho, disappointed, asks, "So there aren't any clues?" Beru tells him he did see some memories of the humans that created the Hyena Guild for Brokey and recovered the kidnapped humans. Suho is surprised to hear that a guild was behind all of this. Beru tells him it's called the Grim Reaper and suggests if they dig into that guild, they might find out more about the Aterum. The scene shifts to an office where a man gets a call. He asks the person, "Didn't you go to South Asia to help with the raid?" The man replies, "That's not important. Didn't you see the news article?" He confronts the man, saying he knows he's the one behind the Hyena Gang incident. The man denies it, saying, "I don't know anything about that," and tries to change the topic. The man on the phone stops him, saying, "Don't change the topic. I already found out that you did some kind of commission with the Hyena Guild. The association will soon find that out too." He replies by telling him, "What if they ask me about it? What can they do if I say I didn't do it?" And threatens that once he mobilizes his lawyers, not even the association can say anything. The man on the call replies, telling him not to be overconfident. The law might not be powerful enough, but the association chairman is not easy to deal with, and he tells him to wrap things up cleanly before he comes back and hangs up the phone. This angers him, and he says, "He used to be my driver, but now he's gotten all arrogant because he's an S rank, and smashes the table." He turns his attention to Suho, that guy who defeated Brokey and destroyed the Hyena Guild. "From the information I got from the survivors, they only said that he was a young hunter who wore a black mask," and starts reaching into his pocket, saying, "I don't have any time to waste on someone I don't have enough information on right now," and brings out a drug, saying, "This is more important." This man's name was Lee Min-sung, Vice CEO of the Crime Reaper Guild, an A-rank hunter, and what he has in his hands is a hunter awakening stimulant, Stardust. He adds by saying if the business goes well, no one will be able to look down on him anymore. We see Gray hunting the goblins in the Shadow Dungeon, and Beru praises him, saying, "You are fighting pretty well now. Continue to grow stronger so that you can protect the young monarch," and tells him to eat to his heart's content, calling him, Growl. Suho is thinking, how did Gray's name become Growl? And is happy to see Gray adapting faster than he expected. Suho receives a notification telling him that Gray has obtained a certain amount of EXP from hunting monsters and has reached a target. Express is now shared with the player. He tells Beru that he is getting Express from Gray hunting and asks, did such a system exist previously? Beru replies he's not sure, but it looks similar to when the Shadow Soldiers hunt and the Express goes to the Shadow Monarch. Suho thinks it's like a party system in a game where Express is shared and says even though he got 50% of the Express, it's pretty good that he can get Express automatically. Beru says, in that case, let's get Gray to keep hunting here, and we look at Gray, who looks scared. Suho receives a notification telling him that as he has killed a certain number of monsters within the Shadow Dungeon, a quest requirement has been fulfilled, and he now will get daily quests and has to kill a certain number of goblins in the Shadow Dungeon for a daily reward. Beru tells him the system wants this place to be his permanent territory. Suho thinks, I'm supposed to find 100 goblins in such a big place, and remembers something. He opens his inventory and takes out a horn flute that he acquired from one of the scout goblins. He uses the flute, and a bunch of goblins show up, charging at him as he stands there excited. Beru is surprised that it worked. Suho charges his punch and starts to attack the approaching goblins. He overpowers them all easily with just his brute strength. He thinks goblins are boring now, and since he has to kill a lot of them, he uses the flute again, and more goblins start to appear. He keeps at it for a while until he sees enough goblins in the area. He uses shadow extraction on the defeated goblins, and along with Gray, starts charging into battle. After 3 hours of hunting goblins, Gray is exhausted, but they manage to complete the daily quest. As Suho is checking his rewards, he notices that the quest numbers look a little strange. He tells Beru that the quest has been completed, but the numbers are still increasing. With a smirk, he tells Beru that if the count continues to increase, there could be something hidden. I should take this chance to see when the counter stops, Suho says, and we see Gray's scared face after hearing that. After another round of killing goblins, we see Gray, who is at his limit and his soul is leaving his body. Suho looks at the new notification telling him the shadow cleanup has been completed, asking if he would like to check his rewards. Suho is excited that there really were some hidden rewards. He looks at the rewards he gained. Status recovery along with 3 ability points. He also got 2 new rewards. A blessed box and a cursed box that contain random rewards, but he has to choose one. Suho checked his status recovery which recovered his condition perfectly. He thinks he should reserve this reward because it could be an easy way for him to recover if he gets injured in the middle of a fight. He looks at his available points and thinks it will become harder as he levels up. He can use the daily quest reward to get stronger every day. Then he looks at the last reward that tells him to choose between a blessed box that provides the player with an item he wants and a random cursed box that provides the player with an item he needs. Suho is thinking about which one he should choose. He thinks, if I get what I want, it might not be what I need. If I get what I need, something I don't want could appear. He thinks what he wants is too vague, and right now, he needs a lot of different things, so he chooses the cursed box and gets the Vulcan's horn. It was a pair of gauntlets made from the horns of the avaricious demon Vulcan. It contains the authority of Vulcan and can cause a lot of additional damage. It had 2 effects. It increased the physical damage by 30%, and the second effect, the more demon souls Suho devours, the stronger the authority of Vulcan will become. Suho is really happy with the reward and puts the gauntlets on. He thinks they are a little heavy, so he'll have to invest all his ability points into strength. As he is thinking, I just need to hunt demons and grow my weapon now, he receives a notification stating there has been a change in his teammate's condition. He notices that Gray's status has changed from respect to fear, and he notices Gray, who is sitting there looking at Suho scared. Beru scolds Suho, saying that Gray isn't a shadow soldier with infinite stamina. Suho apologizes and suggests they should rest, as he has things that he needs to find outside too. He exits the shadow dungeon with Beru and asks him, did they say the name of the guild related to the hyena guild as Grim Reaper? Beru replies, yes. As he is thinking about where he should start investigating, he receives a message on his phone. He checks, and it is the instructor asking for his help. Suho arrives at the location and sees the instructor in his work uniform. He thanks Suho for coming and explains he was supposed to go into a dungeon today, but the whole collection team suddenly ghosted him. Suho asks, did none of them show up? And the instructor tells him they are probably somewhere drinking together. Suho asks him to calm down, he will help him. Hearing that, the instructor gets happy and gives Suho protective clothing. He tells Suho that working as a collector is way more dangerous than being an excavator, so wearing protective clothing is a must. He explains that the excavating team only goes in and digs after the hunt is complete, but the collecting team needs to collect things from the monsters that the strike team killed, so they need to follow behind them closely. The instructor says this is just in case there's an unforeseen monster ambush, and also because the thorns or scales of the monster corpses could injure them. Suho understands and puts the clothes on. As the hunter team arrives, they ask why there are so few people in the collection team. The instructor tells them the whole collection team has gone missing. The hunters get angry after hearing that and call them irresponsible, reminding him that they had a contract and telling the instructor that they paid a lot of money to the Grim Reaper Guild for the entrance ticket to the dungeon. They threaten that if they dare to lag behind, they'll send an official complaint against them to the association and make sure they never get to do collection work again. As he walks away, we see a scared instructor telling Suho, "I'm not even the collection team leader," and asks Suho to use his summons to help. As Suho is looking at the team, he notices the team consists of 4D rank magic type hunters, 5D rank combat type hunters, and 1 C rank healer, and the one shouting right now was the C rank healer. He assumes that he must be the leader of the team. As they enter the dungeon, the instructor tells Suho to be careful as the floor is slippery. Suho thinks that the random cursed box that was said to give him what he needs and the weapon that devours demons, which came out of it called the Vulcan's Horn, and the timely coincidence of the instructor and him coming into this field type dungeon that is owned by the Grim Reaper Guild. If all of this isn't a simple coincidence. As Suho is thinking that, we see demonic figures standing in the dungeon waiting for their next target as Suho feels that something dangerous is about to happen. And part 1 of the series ends. I hope you like it, so consider giving a thumbs